The words "no one else will want you" still echo in my mind 3 years later, but now they sound different, hollow, desperate, pathetic, like the last gasps of a drowning man trying to drag me down with him. Back then, those words felt like a death sentence carved into my soul with a rusty blade. Now they sound like the most beautiful lie anyone ever told me. I remember the exact moment he said it. We were standing in our kitchen, well, what used to be our kitchen, and the morning light was streaming through the window, illuminating the dust motes floating between us like tiny witnesses to my destruction. My hands were shaking as I held the phone, the evidence of his betrayal glowing on the screen like a neon sign advertising my stupidity. The text messages. God, the text messages. 3 months of them, detailed and explicit, between him and her. My best friend, my maid of honor. The woman who helped me pick out the engagement ring that was now cutting into my finger like a tourniquet, cutting off the circulation to my heart. I had found them by accident. His phone had buzzed during our movie night, and he was in the bathroom. The screen lit up with her name, and something in my chest twisted. Not intuition exactly, more like the way your body knows it's about to throw up before your brain catches up. I picked up his phone, and my thumbprint unlocked it, because we trusted each other, because we were supposed to be getting married in 4 months, because I was an idiot. The first message I saw made my vision blur, not from tears, but from something deeper, like my brain was trying to protect me by refusing to process the words. But I kept scrolling, each message a fresh knife wound, each heart emoji a drop of poison in my bloodstream. 3 months. They had been doing this for 3 months. While I was planning our wedding, tasting cakes, addressing invitations, she was tasting him. While I was choosing flowers that would make our special day perfect, she was sending him pictures that made my stomach turn inside out. When he came back from the bathroom, whistling some tune like he didn't have a care in the world, I was still standing there holding his phone. The whistling died on his lips when he saw my face. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, loud and irregular, like a broken metronome. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating, like trying to breathe through wet cotton. He didn't even try to deny it at first. That's what gutted me the most. No scrambling for explanations, no panicked attempts to snatch the phone away. Just resignation, like he'd been waiting for this moment, maybe even hoping for it. Then the words started pouring out of him. Not apologies, not explanations, justifications. It was my fault, apparently. I had become distant. I was too focused on the wedding planning. I didn't pay enough attention to him. I had gained weight. I wasn't adventurous enough in bed. I was boring, predictable, suffocating. Each excuse felt like a physical blow. My chest was tight, my throat was closing up, and my hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold onto his phone. But I didn't cry. Not yet. The tears were there, building up behind my eyes like water behind a dam, but something else was stronger. Rage. Pure, crystalline rage that made everything sharp and clear. That's when he said it. When I finally found my voice and told him to get out, to pack his things and leave, he laughed. Actually laughed, like I had told him a mildly amusing joke. The laugh died when he saw my expression. Then his face changed, twisted into something I had never seen before. Something cruel and calculating that made me realize I had never really known him at all. The man I thought I was going to marry was a stranger wearing the face of someone I loved. His voice when he spoke was different too, colder, more deliberate, like he was choosing each word specifically to cause maximum damage. That's when he told me no one else would want me. He said it slowly, methodically, like he was explaining a mathematical equation. I was damaged goods now, he said. Too old to start over. Too set in my ways. Too ordinary, too plain, too boring for anyone else to love. He painted a picture of my future that was so bleak, so hopeless, that for a moment I almost believed him. He described me growing old alone, surrounded by cats, bitter and forgotten, while he and Sarah, my best friend since college, Sarah, who had been my bridesmaid at every major life event, lived happily ever after. The worst part was how matter-of-fact he sounded. Not angry, not even particularly cruel, just stating what he considered to be obvious facts. Like he was a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis, professional and detached. I felt something break inside me when he said those words. Not my heart. That had been shattered the moment I saw those text messages. Something deeper. Something fundamental. The part of me that had believed I was worthy of love, that had trusted in happy endings, that had faith in the goodness of people. He left that night, but not before twisting the knife a little deeper. He told me he was doing me a favor by being honest. Better I find out now than after the wedding. Better I face reality than live in a fantasy. He was practically humanitarian in his cruelty, the way he told it. I spent the next 3 days in bed, not sleeping, not eating, just staring at the ceiling and replaying every moment of our relationship, looking for clues I had missed. The phone calls that went unanswered, the times he came home late smelling like her perfume, how had I not recognized it? The way he had suddenly become critical of everything about me, from my appearance to my career to my dreams. I had thought he was just stressed about the wedding. Men get cold feet, right? They panic about commitment. I had made excuses for him, rationalized his behavior, blamed myself for being too sensitive, too needy, too much. The wedding invitations were sitting on my kitchen table, already addressed and stamped, ready to be mailed. 200 people were expecting to celebrate our love story. The dress was hanging in my closet, still in its protective bag, a $3,000 symbol of my delusions. The deposits were paid, the vendors booked, the future I had planned mapped out in meticulous detail. All of it, every single bit of it, was built on lies. On the 4th day, Sarah called. I saw her name on my phone and felt a surge of something that wasn't quite anger, wasn't quite hurt, but something darker and more complex. Betrayal has its own unique flavor, I discovered. It tastes like copper pennies and bitter medicine, and it sits in your mouth long after you swallow it. I answered the phone because I needed to hear her voice. I needed to understand how someone who had held my hair back when I was sick, who had listened to me cry over every heartbreak, who had helped me pick out the engagement ring, could do this to me. Her voice was different too. Smaller, shakier. She knew that I knew. She tried to explain, but her words kept getting tangled up in sobs and apologies that felt as hollow as her promises of friendship had been. She said it just happened. She said she never meant for it to go this far. She said she was going to tell me after the wedding. After the wedding. Like that would have been better. Like finding out my husband was cheating with my best friend during our honeymoon would have been a kindness. I listened to her cry and make excuses for 20 minutes, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even the satisfaction of watching her squirm. Just a cold, empty numbness that scared me more than the pain had. When she finally ran out of words, I told her something that surprised us both. I told her she could have him. I said it calmly, without emotion, like I was giving her directions to the grocery store. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. She had been prepared for screaming, for accusations, for drama. She hadn't been prepared for my indifference. I hung up and looked around my apartment now, not ours, and felt something shift inside me. The numbness was wearing off, but what replaced it wasn't pain. It was something harder, more focused. Something that made my spine straighten and my jaw clench and my hands steady. I wasn't going to fall apart. I wasn't going to prove him right. I wasn't going to become the bitter, lonely woman he had described, the cautionary tale he would tell his friends about the crazy ex-fiancé who couldn't handle the truth. I was going to become something else entirely. The planning started that night. Not revenge exactly, at least not in the traditional sense. I wasn't going to slash his tires or send anonymous letters to his boss or post his secrets on social media. That would be giving him too much power, letting him occupy too much space in my head. No, my revenge was going to be much more elegant than that. My revenge was going to be living so well, becoming so happy, that his words would turn to ash in his mouth every time he remembered saying them. I made lists. Goals, deadlines, action items. I approached my own transformation with the same methodical planning I had used for our wedding, except this time, I was the only beneficiary. First, I had to deal with the practical matters. Cancel the wedding vendors, return the dress, send out the cancellation cards. Each task felt like pulling glass from a wound, but I did them one by one, mechanically, efficiently. The hardest part was writing the cancellation message. How do you explain that your perfect love story was actually a lie without sounding pathetic? How do you maintain your dignity while admitting you were completely fooled? I kept it simple. Due to unforeseen circumstances, the wedding was canceled. Thank you for your understanding. No details, no explanations, no invitations for people to pity me or take sides. Some people called anyway. My mother cried. My sister wanted to drive over with a baseball bat and a bottle of wine. My college friends offered to key his car and toilet paper his apartment. Their outrage on my behalf was touching, but it felt distant, like they were angry about something that had happened to someone else. I told everyone the same thing. I was fine. I was handling it. I didn't want to talk about it. After a few weeks, they stopped calling, which was exactly what I wanted. The second phase of my plan was harder, figuring out who I was without him. We had been together for 4 years, engaged for 1. I had shaped myself around our relationship, our shared goals, our mutual friends. I had become half of a couple so gradually that I couldn't remember what it felt like to be a whole person on my own. I started with small things. I rearranged the furniture in the apartment, not because the old arrangement reminded me of him, but because I wanted to see what it felt like to make decisions based solely on my own preferences. I bought new sheets, not to erase the memory of him in my bed, but to sleep in colors that made me happy. I rejoined the gym, not to lose the weight he had complained about, but to feel strong again. I started saying yes to invitations I would have declined when I was part of a couple. I took a cooking class, joined a book club, signed up for Spanish lessons. Each new activity felt like adding a brushstroke to a painting of myself that had been left unfinished. I was rediscovering parts of my personality that had been dormant, interests that had been pushed aside, dreams that had been compromised to fit into our shared vision of the future. The book club was where I met Marcus. I wasn't looking for anyone. That's important to understand. I wasn't trying to prove anything or make anyone jealous or fill a void. I was genuinely, completely focused on rebuilding myself, and romance was the furthest thing from my mind. Marcus was the only other person under 50 in a group of retired English teachers and librarians, and he looked as out of place as I felt. Tall and slightly rumpled, with the kind of smile that made you want to smile back before you even knew why. We ended up sitting next to each other during the discussion of that month's book, something about love in the time of war that I had only half read because I was still allergic to happy endings. When the group leader asked for our thoughts on the protagonist's romantic choices, Marcus leaned over and whispered that he thought the guy was an idiot for not recognizing a good thing when he had it. I looked at him sharply, wondering if he somehow knew my story, but his expression was innocent, focused on the book. Just a genuine opinion about a fictional character. After the meeting, he offered to walk me to my car. Not in a pushy, predatory way, but casually, like it was the natural thing to do. We ended up talking for 2 hours in the parking lot about books and movies and travel and a dozen other things that had nothing to do with my ex or his betrayal or the ruins of my former life. When I finally got home that night, I realized I had gone 3 hours without thinking about what had happened to me. 3 hours of just being present, engaged, interested in something other than my own pain. It was the first sign that I was going to survive this. Marcus and I started as friends. Real friends, not the kind of friendship that's really just dating with training wheels. We talked about books over coffee, went to movies that neither of us could convince anyone else to see, shared terrible jokes and unpopular opinions about everything from politics to pizza toppings. He made me laugh. Not the polite laughter you give someone when they're trying too hard to be funny, but genuine, surprised laughter that bubbled up from somewhere I thought had been permanently damaged. He also made me think about books, about ideas, about the kind of person I wanted to be. Our conversations had depth and substance in a way that I realized my relationship with my ex never had. We had talked about logistics, whose turn it was to do laundry, where we wanted to go for vacation, what color to paint the bathroom. But we had never really talked about anything that mattered. With Marcus, everything mattered. The way he saw the world was different from mine, and instead of trying to change my perspective or dismiss his, we would explore the differences, turn them over like interesting stones, see what we could learn from each other. 6 months after my wedding that never was, Marcus asked me out on what he called a proper date. Not coffee or a movie or a casual book club meeting, but dinner at a real restaurant with cloth napkins and wine glasses and the kind of atmosphere that suggested romantic intentions. I panicked, not because I didn't like him. I did, more than I had expected to like anyone ever again, but because I could hear my ex's voice in my head, reminding me that no one else would want me, that I was damaged goods, that I was too ordinary and boring to inspire genuine love. What if Marcus was just being kind? What if he felt sorry for me? What if this was charity, not romance? I almost said no. I had my phone in my hand, ready to text him some excuse about being too busy or not ready to date, when I stopped myself. This was exactly what my ex had wanted. This fear, this self-doubt, this certainty that I wasn't worthy of love. He had planted these thoughts in my head like poisoned seeds, and I had been watering them with my insecurity for months. But what if he was wrong? What if the man who had cheated on me with my best friend and then tried to convince me it was my fault wasn't actually the most reliable judge of my worth? I said yes to Marcus. Our first date was perfect in all the ways that matter and imperfect in all the ways that make a good story. He spilled wine on his shirt, I got nervous and talked too much about work. The restaurant was louder than expected, so we had to lean across the table to hear each other. But he looked at me like I was the most interesting person in the room. He laughed at my stories, asked follow-up questions, remembered details from conversations we had weeks ago. When I made a self-deprecating joke about being a disaster, he looked genuinely confused and said he thought I was remarkable. Remarkable. When was the last time someone had used that word to describe me? We walked around downtown after dinner, talking and window shopping and pretending we weren't both nervous about how the evening would end. When he walked me to my car, he asked if he could kiss me, and the question was so sweet, so respectful, so different from the entitled way my ex had approached physical intimacy that I almost cried. The kiss was soft and tentative and tasted like hope. Driving home that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in almost a year, genuinely excited about the future. Not because of Marcus specifically, though he was certainly part of it, but because I was remembering what it felt like to be chosen, valued, pursued by someone who saw the best in me instead of cataloging my flaws. My ex had been wrong. Someone else did want me. Someone kind and intelligent and funny wanted me, not despite my supposed flaws, but because of who I actually was. The relationship with Marcus developed slowly, carefully, like we were both afraid of breaking something precious. We went on actual dates, dinners, concerts, art galleries, weekend trips to small towns with antique shops and farmers markets. We had long phone conversations that stretched late into the night. We introduced each other to our friends, our families, our favorite places, and secret dreams. I told him about my ex eventually, not because I needed to process the pain. I had done that work on my own, but because I wanted him to understand why I sometimes hesitated before accepting compliments, why I occasionally pulled back when things got too good, why I was slower to trust than I might have been otherwise. He listened without trying to fix me or offer advice or make promises about healing my wounds. He just listened, and then he said that my ex sounded like an idiot, and that he was grateful the other man had been stupid enough to let me go. We had been dating for 8 months when Marcus told me he loved me. We were cooking dinner together in his kitchen, something we had started doing on Sunday evenings, and I was telling him about a problem at work when he stopped chopping vegetables and just looked at me. The way he said it was so simple, so matter-of-fact, like he was commenting on the weather or asking me to pass the salt. Like loving me was the most natural thing in the world. "I love you too," I said, and realized I meant it completely. Not the desperate, clinging love I had felt for my ex, the kind that was really just fear of being alone dressed up in romantic language. This was something steadier, more genuine. Love based on actually knowing each other, on choosing each other every day, on building something together instead of just falling into it. We moved in together a year and a half after my wedding that never was. Not because it was the next logical step, or because it made financial sense, but because we wanted to wake up together and fall asleep together and share the mundane daily moments that make up a real life. His apartment became our apartment, my books mixed with his books, my terrible morning coffee routine adapted to his superior coffee-making skills. We found a rhythm that worked for both of us, a balance between togetherness and independence that I hadn't known was possible. I was happy. Genuinely, completely, surprisingly happy. And then, exactly 2 years after my ex had told me no one else would want me, I saw him at the grocery store. I was in the cereal aisle, debating between Marcus's preferred brand and the healthier option I had been trying to convince him to try, when I heard a familiar laugh. Not a happy laugh, the kind of forced, too loud laugh people make when they're trying to convince themselves they're having a good time. I looked up, and there he was, standing by the frozen foods with a woman I didn't recognize. She was pretty in a generic way, blonde and thin and expensively dressed, but there was something brittle about her smile, something strained about the way she was looking at him. He looked older than I remembered. Not just 2 years older, but weathered, like he had been through something that had worn him down. His hair was thinning, his face was softer around the edges, and there was a defeated quality to his posture that I had never seen before. But it was his eyes that shocked me. They looked desperate, hungry, like a man who was starving but couldn't remember what food tasted like. I watched them for a moment, hidden behind my cart and a display of crackers. The woman, his girlfriend presumably, was talking about dinner plans, and he was nodding along, but I could see that he wasn't really listening. His attention kept drifting, his gaze wandering around the store like he was looking for something he couldn't find. That's when he saw me. The recognition hit his face like a physical blow. His mouth actually fell open, and for a moment, he looked like he might run. Then he straightened up, put on a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and started walking toward me. My first instinct was to flee, to abandon my cart and slip out through the nearest exit and avoid this confrontation entirely. But then I remembered who I was now, who I had become in the 2 years since he had tried to destroy my self-worth. I stood my ground. He approached cautiously like I might bite if he got too close. The woman trailed behind him, looking confused and slightly annoyed. He said my name like a question, like he wasn't sure I was real. Then he asked how I was, in the careful tone people use when they're not sure they want to know the answer. "I'm great," I said, and meant it. Really great. He waited for me to elaborate, to ask about his life, to show some sign that I was still invested in his story. When I didn't, when I just smiled politely and continued shopping, something flickered across his face. Confusion, maybe, or disappointment. The woman cleared her throat and introduced herself. She was his girlfriend, she said, with a slight emphasis on the word that suggested she wasn't entirely secure in the position. They had been together for 6 months. 6 months. That meant there had been others between Sarah and this one. Multiple others, probably, none of them lasting, none of them filling whatever void he was trying to fill. We made small talk for a few awkward minutes. He asked about my job, my family, whether I was still living in the same apartment. Basic catching-up questions that felt strange coming from someone who had once known every detail of my daily routine. I answered politely but didn't volunteer any information about Marcus, about my happiness, about the life I had built without him. Let him wonder. Let him assume I was still the broken, desperate woman he had left behind. But then Marcus appeared at the end of the aisle, looking for me with that unconscious smile he got whenever he spotted me in a crowd. He was carrying the coffee beans I had forgotten to grab, and when he saw me, his whole face lit up with uncomplicated joy. "Hey, babe," he said, sliding up beside me and kissing my cheek like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Did you find the cereal you wanted?" The effect on my ex was immediate and devastating. I watched him take in Marcus's appearance, tall, handsome, well-dressed, clearly successful, and then look at the way Marcus touched me, casual and affectionate and completely comfortable. I introduced them casually. "Marcus, this is my ex-fiancé, and his girlfriend." Marcus shook his hand with perfect politeness, but I could see him sizing up the situation, understanding without being told that this was the man who had hurt me. His arm tightened slightly around my waist, a subtle but unmistakable gesture of protection and possession. My ex tried to make conversation, asking Marcus about his work, where we met, how long we had been together. Each answer seemed to hit him like a small punch. Marcus was a professor at the local university. We had met at book club. We had been together for almost 2 years now. 2 years. Exactly as long as my ex had been single, apparently, cycling through relationships that didn't stick, searching for something he couldn't seem to find. The girlfriend, I never did catch her name, was getting increasingly uncomfortable. She kept looking between my ex and me, clearly sensing undercurrents she didn't understand. When Marcus mentioned that we were shopping for ingredients for Sunday dinner, she made some comment about how domestic we were, and there was acid in her voice. My ex didn't seem to notice her discomfort. He was too busy staring at me like he was seeing a ghost. Not the ghost of who I used to be, but the ghost of who he had insisted I could never become. Because I looked good. Better than good. I looked happy, confident, loved. My hair was different. Longer, styled in a way that flattered my face. I had lost some weight, not from stress or heartbreak, but from being active and healthy and cooking meals with someone who cared about my well-being. I was wearing clothes that fit properly, makeup that enhanced instead of hiding, jewelry that Marcus had given me for my birthday. But more than any of the physical changes, there was something different in the way I carried myself. I stood straighter, spoke more confidently, took up space without apologizing for it. I looked like a woman who knew she was valued, who had never been told she was too much or not enough or lucky to be wanted at all. I looked like everything he had told me I could never be. The conversation eventually wound down to its natural conclusion. "Nice seeing you. Take care. Maybe we'll run into each other again sometime." The usual empty pleasantries people exchange when they have nothing real to say to each other. As we walked away, I heard his girlfriend asking him who I was, really. There was suspicion in her voice, insecurity, the tone of a woman who knew she was competing with a memory and wasn't sure she was winning. I heard him start to explain, his voice getting fainter as we moved toward the checkout line. "Just an ex," he said. "No one important?" But I could hear the lie in his voice, and I was pretty sure she could too. Marcus was quiet until we got to the car. Then he asked if I was okay, if seeing my ex had been difficult, if I wanted to talk about it. I considered the question seriously. Was I okay? Had it been difficult? The honest answer was that it had been easier than I expected. Seeing him hadn't reopened old wounds or brought back painful memories. If anything, it had provided a kind of closure I hadn't known I needed. 2 years ago, he had painted a picture of my future that was designed to terrify me into staying. He had described a lonely, bitter woman that no one could love, someone so fundamentally flawed that she would drive away anyone who tried to get close. But the woman I had become was nothing like that prophecy. I was loved, cherished, valued by someone who saw the best in me and brought out qualities I hadn't even known I possessed. I was happy in a way that was sustainable and genuine, not dependent on someone else's validation or approval. I had proved him wrong in every possible way, and he knew it. I could see it in his eyes, the recognition that his words had not only failed to destroy me, but had actually motivated me to become better than I had ever been before. "I'm more than okay," I told Marcus. "I'm perfect." And I meant it. We went home and cooked dinner together, something simple and delicious that we ate while talking about our days, our plans for the week, a book Marcus was reading that he thought I might enjoy. Normal couple things, comfortable and easy and unremarkable in the best possible way. Later that evening, I checked social media for the first time in months. I wasn't looking for information about my ex. I was genuinely curious about some college friends I had lost touch with, but his profile appeared in my suggested friends list. I almost didn't click on it. What was the point? I had moved on, built a new life, found genuine happiness. His story was no longer relevant to mine. But curiosity won, and I found myself scrolling through 2 years of his posts. The pattern was immediately obvious. A new girlfriend every few months, each relationship documented with the same formulaic posts. Dinner dates, vacation photos, couple selfies with captions about finding love and being happy and starting new chapters. But the relationships never lasted. The photos would stop appearing, the loving captions would disappear, and a few weeks later, there would be a new woman, a new set of dinner dates, a new proclamation of happiness that looked exactly like all the others. He was cycling through women like he was shopping for something specific, but could never quite find what he was looking for. Each new relationship looked promising in the beginning, full of excitement and potential, but they all seemed to follow the same trajectory: intense beginning, rapid progression, gradual cooling off, inevitable end. The most recent posts were about the woman from the grocery store. They had been together for 6 months, according to his timeline, which made her his longest relationship since Sarah. But even the photos from last week looked strained, forced, like they were both trying too hard to convince themselves they were happy. I found myself feeling something I hadn't expected: pity. Not the kind of pity that comes from superiority or schadenfreude, but genuine sadness for someone who was clearly struggling and didn't seem to understand why. He was searching for something: love, validation, the kind of connection that makes life meaningful, but he kept sabotaging himself. I remembered how he had treated me toward the end of our relationship, the constant criticism, the way he had made me feel like I was never quite good enough, the cruel words designed to keep me insecure and dependent. At the time, I had thought it was about me, about my failures as a partner. But looking at his pattern with other women, I realized it wasn't personal. It was his process. He would find someone who loved him, then systematically destroy her confidence until she either left or became so diminished that he lost interest. Then he would move on to someone new and start the cycle over again. It was a deeply broken way to approach relationships, and it guaranteed that he would never find the kind of lasting love that everyone deserves. The woman in the grocery store, the one who had introduced herself as his girlfriend with that slight edge of insecurity in her voice, was probably getting the same treatment I had received. The same subtle put-downs, the same impossible standards, the same erosion of self-worth disguised as helpful feedback. And someday, when she finally had enough and left, he would tell her the same thing he had told me, that no one else would want her, that she was lucky he had tolerated her flaws for as long as he had, that she would regret leaving him when she was old and alone and desperate. But the pattern in his social media told a different story. He was the one who was alone, who couldn't maintain a relationship, who kept starting over with new people because he couldn't figure out how to build something lasting with anyone. I closed the app and put my phone away. Marcus was reading on the couch, and when I sat down next to him, he automatically shifted to make room for me, his arm coming around my shoulders like it belonged there. This was what my ex had told me I would never have. This easy intimacy, this comfortable partnership, this sense of being completely known and loved anyway. He had been so wrong about so many things, but mostly he had been wrong about my worth, my lovability, my capacity to find and keep genuine happiness. I had spent 2 years proving him wrong, and I had succeeded beyond my wildest expectations. 6 months later, I saw the breakup post on social media. My ex and the grocery store woman had ended their relationship, and he was back to the usual cycle of cryptic posts about new beginnings and learning from the past and being open to love when the right person came along. The woman posted her own version of the breakup, less cryptic and more honest. She wrote about recognizing her worth, about refusing to accept treatment that made her feel small, about choosing herself over a relationship that was slowly poisoning her self-esteem. Good for her, I thought. It had taken me 4 years to recognize what she had figured out in 6 months. Maybe my ex was getting less skilled at his manipulation, or maybe women were getting better at recognizing it. Either way, she was free. And that was what mattered. Marcus and I got engaged that fall, 2.5 years after my first engagement had imploded. The proposal was nothing like my ex's had been, no grand gestures or public displays, just Marcus and me on a quiet walk through our favorite park, talking about our future like we did every day, when he stopped suddenly and said he had something to ask me. The ring was perfect, not because it was expensive or flashy, but because he had chosen it specifically for me. He knew I didn't like big stones or ornate settings, that I preferred simple elegance to flashy displays. He had listened to me, learned my preferences, cared enough to get it exactly right. When I said yes, and of course I said yes, he kissed me like we had all the time in the world, like he wasn't worried about other people watching or whether the moment was Instagram-worthy or how the story would sound when we told it later. We planned a small ceremony, just family and close friends, the kind of intimate celebration that focuses on the marriage instead of the wedding. No stress, no drama, no months of planning that turned into a second job. Just 2 people who loved each other, promising to keep loving each other, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about our happiness. My ex's words, "No one else will want you," had become a kind of dark joke between Marcus and me. Whenever I was being particularly charming or lovable or just existing in his space, he would grin and say something like, "Weird, I definitely want you," or "Funny, you seem pretty wantable to me." It was his way of reminding me how wrong those words had been, how completely they had missed the truth about who I was and what I had to offer. Because the truth was, I wasn't just wanted. I was cherished, valued, adored by someone who saw all of me, the good parts and the difficult parts and the ordinary everyday parts, and chose me anyway, every single day. My ex had tried to convince me that I was unlovable, that I should be grateful for whatever scraps of affection he was willing to throw my way. But real love, I learned, doesn't feel like gratitude for being tolerated. It feels like coming home, like being seen, like being chosen not despite your flaws but as a complete, complex, worthy human being. The last time I checked my ex's social media, and I did stop checking eventually, he was single again. Still posting about new beginnings and lessons learned and being open to love. Still cycling through the same patterns, the same promises, the same inevitable disappointments. I felt no satisfaction in his continued struggles, no vindication in his inability to find lasting happiness. Mostly, I just felt grateful that I had escaped that orbit, that I had refused to believe his version of my worth, that I had rebuilt myself into someone capable of giving and receiving genuine love. 3 years after he told me no one else would want me, I was married to someone who couldn't imagine wanting anyone else. We had built a life together that was comfortable without being boring, passionate without being unstable, supportive without being codependent. We traveled together, cooked together, read the same books and argued about the endings. We had inside jokes and shared dreams and the kind of easy intimacy that comes from truly knowing another person. I had become everything my ex had told me I never could be: happy, loved, chosen, valued, wanted not just by someone, but by someone extraordinary. His prophecy had been wrong in every possible way, and living well, living joyfully, authentically, lovingly, had turned out to be the most perfect revenge of all. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had believed him. If I had internalized his assessment of my worth and spent the rest of my life trying to prove I was good enough for someone, anyone, to love. I might have settled for the first person who showed interest, so grateful to be chosen that I wouldn't have noticed if they didn't actually see me, or value me, or want to build something real together. I might have spent years trying to be smaller, quieter, less demanding, molding myself into whatever shape I thought would be most palatable to potential partners. I might have missed Marcus entirely, too focused on proving my ex wrong to recognize when someone was trying to prove me right. But I didn't believe him. Or rather, I believed him just long enough to let his words motivate me to become better, stronger, more myself than I had ever been before. I had taken his cruelest prediction and turned it into my greatest triumph. And now, when I look back on that conversation in our kitchen, his kitchen, I should say, since it was never really ours, I can hear how desperate he sounded, how much he needed me to believe those words were true. Because if no one else would want me, then I would stay. I would accept his betrayal, forgive his cruelty, be grateful for whatever he was willing to give me. I would make myself smaller and smaller until I disappeared entirely, leaving nothing but a convenient placeholder for whatever he needed me to be. But I refused to disappear. I refused to accept his definition of my worth. I refused to let his fears about his own lovability become my reality. Instead, I had become proof that love, real love, healthy love, the kind of love that builds people up instead of tearing them down, was not only possible but inevitable once you know what you're worth. The woman he told no one else would want was wanted, chosen, cherished, and loved beyond measure. And he was still alone, still searching, still wondering why nothing ever worked out the way he planned. Sometimes the best revenge really is living well. Sometimes proving someone wrong is as simple as refusing to prove them right.